My name is Olivia Hayes, and I don't usually tell people the whole story of how I got here. On the surface, my life looks polished, effortless even. The kind of life people scroll past on Instagram and whisper about. Glass walls overlooking the skyline, a leather-bound planner filled with appointments, the soft click of designer heels against marble floors. But the truth? Every polished detail is stitched together with scars. This morning, as I buttoned up a cream silk blouse, one that still smelled faintly of lavender from last night's dry cleaning, I caught my reflection.
Calm, composed.
Almost cold. That's the version of me the world sees. Not the girl who once stood in the middle of a crowded office, shaking after they laughed in her face. My phone buzzed on the glass desk. A name lit up the screen, one I hadn't seen in years. My chest tightened, my throat went dry. I could almost hear the echo of their voices from back then. You don't belong here. You'll never make it in this industry.
Funny, isn't it?
The same people who once slammed the door in my face were now asking for a meeting. I glanced out the floor-to-ceiling window at the city that never forgave weakness, but always respected power. My lips curled into a smile, not of joy, but of irony. Because the truth is simple. They refused my service. Now I control their industry. I wasn't always Olivia Hayes, CEO. Back then, I was just Olivia, the daughter of a schoolteacher and a mechanic, working nights at a diner and dreaming bigger than my zip code. I still remember the day it all started, the sting of it carved deep in my chest. I was 23, clutching a thin portfolio I'd spent months perfecting. My sketches, my business plan, every late-night idea scrawled in ink. I walked into Stratford Consulting, one of the biggest names in the industry I desperately wanted to be part of. The receptionist didn't even look up when I introduced myself. She just handed me a form like I was invisible. When they finally called me in, 3 men in sharp suits sat across the table, their smiles more like smirks. Olivia, one of them drawled, flipping through my portfolio with disinterest. You've got energy, but this isn't the kind of work we'd ever put our name behind. Honestly, it feels amateur. Maybe start smaller. A local shop. A side hustle. But here? No. The words were knives. My hands trembled in my lap, nails digging into my palms to stop them from shaking. I swallowed hard, tried to steady my voice. If you'd just give me a chance. He cut me off with a laugh. Sweetheart, we don't have time for experiments. Especially not from someone with no connections, no pedigree, and frankly, no chance. That was it. The meeting ended. They didn't just refuse me. They dismissed me, like I was nothing. I walked out of that glass tower with tears burning behind my eyes. Outside, the air smelled of hot asphalt and roasted chestnuts from a vendor down the block. The city felt louder, crueler. That night, I collapsed at my grandmother's tiny apartment. She lived 2 subway stops away, in a space filled with crocheted blankets and photographs of people who had survived harder things than rejection. She poured me tea in a chipped blue cup and pressed my shaking hands between hers. Olivia, she said softly, her voice steady like a hymn, the world will always tell you no. That's their language for fear. But you, she tapped my chest gently. You have fire. When they slam doors, you build your own house. She handed me her old fountain pen, worn smooth by decades of use. Write your story, child. Don't wait for them to sign it. That pen became my anchor, my reminder that my worth wasn't defined by their approval. That night, I made my decision. If they wouldn't open the door, I'd find another way in. With my grandmother's pen tucked into my bag, I started again. Not with money, not with connections, just with grit. By day, I waited tables. By night, I taught myself marketing, finance, contracts, design, anything I could get my hands on. My laptop was secondhand, the screen cracked in the corner, but it was my window to possibility. I still remember one evening at a coffee shop downtown, papers spread out around me, when a woman stopped by my table. She was older, elegant, with silver-streaked hair pulled back into a low bun. She glanced at my sketches, my financial drafts, my frantic notes written in coffee stains and highlighter. "You're either drowning," she said with a wry smile, "or you're about to swim farther than most people ever dare." That was Margaret Lane, a veteran in the very industry that had once spat me out. She'd built her own firm decades ago, sold it for millions, and retired, or so people thought. Margaret became my mentor. She didn't hand me success. She handed me reality. No one will respect you if you don't respect yourself. Stop apologizing for wanting more. Stop asking for permission. Under her guidance, I learned. I stumbled. I cried at 2 a.m. when invoices didn't line up, when a potential client ghosted me, when doubt whispered in the silence of my tiny apartment. But I didn't stop. My first win was small, a bakery owner who needed branding but couldn't afford a big agency. I charged barely enough to cover my bills, but when she hugged me and said, "You made my dream look real," I knew I was onto something. Word spread. Then came a boutique clothing line. Then a tech startup desperate for fresh strategy. My clients weren't glamorous at first, but they were loyal. And slowly I began to build. There were sacrifices. Nights I went without dinner because I had to pay for software instead. Days I wore thrift store blazers to meetings while pretending they were vintage chic. I skipped parties, ignored relationships, and poured everything into building what I wished those men in suits had seen in me. And then came the breakthrough. A mid-sized retail chain, one that had been overlooked by bigger firms, took a chance on me. I worked like my life depended on it, and when their quarterly profits jumped, so did my reputation. Margaret sat across from me in her sunlit kitchen after that deal closed, sipping black coffee. "You're not just surviving anymore, Olivia," she said, her eyes sharp but proud. "You're becoming inevitable." Still, I kept quiet. On social media, I posted modest updates, photos of lattes, city sunsets, maybe a vague, busy day at work caption. My family thought I was just freelancing, scraping by. No one knew the scope of what I was building, because part of me still burned from that rejection. I wanted my empire to rise unseen until it was undeniable. And slowly, brick by brick, client by client, Olivia Hayes became a name people couldn't ignore. The meeting request had come through Margaret, who still kept her ear to the ground in the industry. The name on the email made my heart lurch. Stratford Consulting. The same firm that once tossed my dreams aside like yesterday's newspaper. Now, years later, they were in trouble. Their numbers were plummeting, their biggest clients leaving for fresher, more agile competitors. My competitors. And they wanted to talk. To me. The irony was too sharp to ignore. I told Margaret, schedule it. Here. At my office. The morning of the meeting, I dressed with deliberate precision. A navy blazer tailored to fit like armor, gold earrings that caught the light when I turned my head, and heels that clicked with authority across polished floors. My nails were painted a subtle nude shade, though one corner was chipped. I smiled at that, proof that perfection was an illusion. My office was on the 34th floor, sunlight pouring through glass walls. The space was a reflection of my journey. Sleek leather chairs, modern art from a local painter I'd supported when no one else would, and on my desk, my grandmother's fountain pen encased in crystal. When they arrived, I stood by the window letting them take it in. 3 men in suits again. Different faces, but the same smug arrogance I remembered. Except this time, their arrogance was cracked, uneasy. "Miss Hayes," one began, forcing a polite smile. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with us. We've heard a lot about your firm." I turned slowly, meeting their eyes one by one. They looked around, clearly trying to place me in the grand equation of their world. I could almost hear their thoughts. How did she get here? "I'll be honest," another added, clearing his throat. "We've been impressed by your rapid growth, your strategies, your results. We'd like to discuss a possible collaboration." The audacity made me laugh, not loudly, but just enough for them to hear. "Collaboration?" I repeated, walking back to my desk. I trailed my fingers across the smooth wood, pausing at the crystal case. "You don't remember me, do you?" I asked softly. They exchanged glances.
Confused.
I leaned forward. "Years ago, I walked into your office with a portfolio. I sat across a table just like this, and I asked for a chance. You refused. You told me I didn't belong." Their faces shifted, faint recognition, then discomfort. Well, I continued, my voice steady. I didn't just find a way to belong. I built an empire so strong. Your clients now sit on my roster. The very industry you once told me I had no place in, I control it. Silence hung thick in the room. One man's jaw tightened. Another looked down at his hands. I gestured to the glass walls, the city sprawling beneath us. Look around. This is what your rejection built. Every late night, every setback, every doubt, you fueled it. And now you're here, asking me for help. Their discomfort was almost satisfying, but not cruel. I wasn't here for cruelty. I was here for truth. One of them finally spoke, his voice quieter than before. Ms. Hayes, we underestimated you. That was a mistake. I tilted my head, studying them.
Yes,
It was. For a moment, I let the silence stretch, the weight of it pressing against them. And then I smiled, not out of kindness, but out of victory. You came here thinking you'd find the same desperate girl you once dismissed. But she's gone. In her place is a woman who decides whether you sink or survive. Their stunned silence was answer enough. I let them sit there, shifting uncomfortably in their expensive suits, before I finally spoke again. You came here for help, I said evenly. And I'm not in the business of shutting doors the way you once did to me. But if I step in, it will be on my terms. And those terms aren't negotiable. Their eyes flickered with a mix of hope and unease. First, I began, my tone sharp but calm. You will stop treating people like numbers. Every employee you've overlooked, every intern you've ignored, every woman you've dismissed in a boardroom, they are your lifeline now. If you want my strategies, you'll start by creating a culture of respect. I won't attach my name to arrogance. One of them opened his mouth to protest, but I raised a hand. Second, you will invest in small businesses. Not just the shiny ones that stroke your ego. The underdogs, the dreamers who remind you of the girl you once laughed at. You'll give them resources, guidance, and space to grow. Their jaws tightened, but none of them spoke. And third, I leaned forward, voice lowering. You will acknowledge what you did. Not to me. I've already built my life, without your validation.
but to yourselves.
Write it down. Face it. Remember what happens when you let bias blind you to potential. They sat frozen. Finally, one cleared his throat. And if we agree to these conditions? Then, I said, sitting back, I'll consider helping you restructure. I'll design a roadmap that could save your firm. But make no mistake, I won't hold your hand. You'll do the work, or you'll fall. I have no interest in saving egos. Only legacies. The room was quiet except for the faint hum of the city below us. I let them absorb my words, the weight of them pressing against every brittle piece of pride they had left. Margaret's voice echoed in my mind. Stop apologizing for wanting more. Stop asking for permission. I wasn't asking now. I was commanding. After a long pause, the man in the center finally nodded, his shoulders sagging. We understand. We'll accept your terms. I gave a small, deliberate smile. Good. Because this isn't just about your survival. It's about rewriting the rules of an industry that for too long believed power belonged to the few. Not anymore. I stood, signaling the meeting was over. You wanted my service once and refused it. Now you want my leadership and you'll earn it. As they rose to leave, one of them hesitated at the door. Ms. Hayes, why help us at all? I met his gaze. Because the world doesn't change if we keep repeating the same cruelty. I'd rather build bridges, with conditions, than burn them. And just like that, the power shifted. The men who once dismissed me walked out quieter, smaller, bound by terms they never thought they'd accept. And I felt whole. A week after that meeting, I sat alone in my office long after everyone else had gone home. The city lights glittered below, sharp and endless, like constellations drawn across glass. On my desk sat the crystal case. I opened it gently, lifting out my grandmother's fountain pen. Its weight was familiar, grounding. I ran my thumb along its smooth surface, remembering the night she placed it in my trembling hands. When they slammed doors, You build your own house.
She had been right.
And not only had I built a house, I had built an empire. Stratford Consulting kept their word. Slowly, reluctantly, they started shifting their culture. They sent out new internship offers, this time to candidates they might have once overlooked. They reached out to small businesses on the edge of collapse. They even called me for quarterly check-ins, their tone different now, not arrogant, but respectful. It wasn't perfect. Change never is. But it was a start. And me? I found myself softer, not harder. Power hadn't made me cruel, it had made me free. I still worked long hours, still carried the weight of leadership, but I also found space for joy. Saturday mornings with a good book, evenings spent supporting new entrepreneurs, laughter over wine with friends who loved me for more than my title. One afternoon, I visited my grandmother's grave. I laid fresh lilies against the stone and whispered, "You were right, Grandma." They refused me, and now they follow my lead. The wind rustled through the trees, as if answering back. Driving home, I thought about the girl I had once been, the one who walked out of that glass tower with tear-stained cheeks and a shattered heart. If I could speak to her now, I'd tell her, the rejection you feel today is not the end. It's the seed. I set the pen back in its case and closed the lid. This wasn't just a keepsake anymore. It was a symbol of survival, of transformation, of legacy. I stood by the window one last time, gazing at the city I had once thought too big, too cruel, too impossible to conquer. A smile spread across my face, soft, steady, unstoppable. And with the calm certainty of a woman who had written her own destiny, I whispered, "They refused my service, now I control their industry."